Welcome to 2025. A new year always brings that balance between apprehension for what's ahead, but also some fresh hope and fresh energy as we approach a year, especially with a lot of negativity still around us in the press and with governments and with the economy and all sorts of things that can really drag us down. So my hope and prayer for anyone listening to this podcast at the beginning of 2025 is that you'll look at the year with fresh hope and a fresh anticipation for what could happen this year. So to kick off the year, I'm spending some time with Stewart McCulloch, who is the CEO of Christians Against Poverty. Stewart's a friend of mine and an incredible guy who's spent many years both in business and the non-profit sector, and has got an incredible story of just the journey he's been on throughout his life and how he's ended up at CAP. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Listen in, take notes, and as always, subscribe, like, and share. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wonderful Leaders podcast. And it's great to start 2025 with a special guy called Stewart McCulloch, someone who I've got to know over the last couple of years, and really hoping that we get to go on more of a journey together over the next few years as he lives out the vision that God's given him, and as we sort of work through what we do at the Wonderful Group with Wonderful Leaders and the summit and everything that's happening around those areas. So welcome, Stewart.
Yeah, great to be here, Dan. And I'm also looking forward to journeying with you, particularly as we're looking forward to Wonderful North in March. So very exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting, isn't it? I think just to kind of, I don't want to segue too early on whilst we're talking, but just you mentioned Wonderful Summit North, just the kind of general excitement around it has been really incredible. Like, I was talking to a bunch of other networks over the course of this week, and someone said to me yesterday, in fact, that what's happening in Bradford, like specifically, there's a real sense of innovation and a real sense of fresh kind of hunger and fresh momentum in Bradford specifically, which is where the summit will be. And I'm like, isn't that cool? Because I mean, being really honest, I wasn't sure, about Bradford when we first launched it, and we knew that God had opened up the door with CAP as a partner and Life Church as a partner. But actually, the more I hear about Bradford, the more I'm like, okay, God, you want to do something there. You're moving there. So I'm really excited about it being in Bradford, which is a bizarre thing to say as someone from Kent who's only been to Bradford twice in his life. But I'm ready for it. I'm up for it.
Well, 2025, Bradford's the city of culture.
Right.
It's one of the fastest growing cities in Europe. And it has levels of diversity that are unrivaled. It's got a real energy about it, and a Christian community. I mean, it's been the incubator for a lot of really fantastic charities: Christians Against Poverty, Transform Lives for Good,
Wow.
Mercy, and probably a few others as well. It's quite a place. It really is.
Isn't that amazing? And actually, when we first started having our conversations around Summit North, I didn't know CAP was in Bradford. Yes. I mean, yeah, it's amazing. So look, the Lord's working in Bradford. We're going to be putting on the summit together. Yeah, and just really trusting God for just an incredible day. But more than that, it's about the community piece, isn't it? It's about people's hearts being stirred and kind of like, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah.
And the theme of this year's summit is going to be fresh hope, fresh growth. And I mean, I must admit, Stuart, it's a bit, when you read the papers at the moment, it's a little bit in the doldrums, isn't it? Politically, economically, socially, there's a real sense of like lack of hope and a kind of, the economy's not growing, and we know the interest rates and inflation, and we're just negative story after negative story. So as we've been praying, it's like, no, fresh hope, fresh growth. That's what we're really trusting God for.
But I really believe, and I have really wacky theology, so apologies in
Let's
advance.
go.
But I really find it's easiest to find God in troubled times
Right.
and troubled places. So where have I met him most? It's really been when everything looks dark around, and he's just there making the most of it. Often having Well, enjoying it, just relishing, because when else do we know that we're truly dependent on God other than when, um, you know, everything else is showing itself to be not dependable? I have the privilege to often meet Christians from the most difficult of circumstances, and the more difficult the circumstances, the more serene and peaceful the faith seems to be. And I've met people from, Iraq and I don't know, and various other places, and there's just a real sense of inner peace because they have met their Lord very directly on very many occasions and are transformed by that. So, I think that your title is spot on. You know, um, our nation may be in crisis, our world may be in crisis. God's not in crisis.
Oh, man. Love that. Love that. And Stuart, I want to dig a little bit deeper into, you said you get to meet so many interesting people, and a lot of people listening to this will know you as CEO of CAP, formerly CEO of Stewardship. You're very well sort of known and liked and loved around in the Christian space. And when you're a CEO, there's a certain expectation of your quality, of your skill, of your leadership, of all of those things that a CEO does. But I want to rewind a little bit and go back to young Stuart, young Stewart McCulloch, who wasn't always a CEO of big organizations. So would you just tell me a little bit about like your environment growing up? Where did you grow up and what was that environment like in terms of location, schooling, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I grew up in 1970s Coventry. So,
Right.
and even going a little bit further back to give you my true background. So my mother was one of 11 children growing up in a two-bedroom tenement flat in Glasgow in the
Wow.
30s. My father actually came from a relatively newly built estate called Fergusley Park in Paisley, which is Europe's most deprived housing development. Um, and so my my parents came from incredibly deprived backgrounds, beyond my imagination, if I'm really honest. And so they thought our two up, two down in Coventry was a palace,
Wow.
because it was relative to where they had came from. And poverty is often quite a relative thing. I never thought of myself as poor. But I can remember, the man from the Provident coming to our house as a child. I thought he was providing free money, but it was something slightly different. It was subprime credit. I remember us getting our clothes from catalogs, um, rather than from shops, and all of that just seemed absolutely normal. So if you ask me, Stu, did you come from poverty? I go, no, no. But it's only when I look back, and the fact that I shared a room with my two brothers until I was 18. Oh wow, that's just normal. What doesn't everybody? Yeah.
Right. I was
uh,
just growing up for you.
it's just growing up, and to picture that moment, think of me as a sort of 16, 17, 18-year-old. um the theme tune was Ghost Town from the Specials, and
Right.
Ghost Town refers to my town and what it was like. That song is about my place, my generation, my time, and very precisely what it was like. And I went to an inner city comprehensive that's now a business park, to tell you the truth. It was so bad they closed it down.
Wow.
And of the 150 pupils in my year, 17 of us went on to do A levels. And at the time, I worked this out. It was the time of the short, sharp shock, what they were doing to people who were, a little naughty. And there were 17 in short, sharp shock. And almost everybody else went on to what was called a youth training scheme. Um, there were no jobs. And so
Wow.
when people talk about lost generations and poverty, and again, if you think Coventry in the 60s was a boom town, so in my class at school, there were only I think, two lads who had parents who came from Coventry. We were all Scots, Irish, Indian, West Indian, Polish, so that's the sort of background I came from. That again, it was very troubled times indeed. When I did my O levels, that was the year Margaret Thatcher got elected. Um, and whilst I was at university, I actually married a miner's daughter in 1984 in Barnsley. So my history actually charts industrial decline. Both my parents left Glasgow because the shipyards closed. That's where they learned their trades. They didn't
Right.
have any qualifications, but they learned trades. Um, then they moved to Coventry, and I had to, as it were, leave to go to university as the big car plants and other factories closed. Um, and so, in some ways, I also count as an economic refugee. And I told you, I shared a room with my two brothers. Both of them are CEOs as well.
Really?
Strangely, yeah, absolutely. In fact, my baby brother runs a very large energy company. So he's the as it were the private sector more successful person, and my more chilled middle brother runs a holiday company. So um, we've all done slightly different things with our lives, but that was also something. So you get that sense of almost overachievement coming from a family that experiences poverty and almost flees from it. It becomes a great motivation for some. Um, and so in some ways, when I look at me now, this job I'm doing now is personal because
Wow.
I'm turning round and facing what I fled as a child.
Wow.
Um, and that's really important to me. So it creates an identification and also a sense of spirituality around what it is to lack something
Yeah.
and what it feels like to be in that sort of environment, the isolation, the anxiety, the occasional sense of shame. I remember that in my parents. And just a little bit more about me. At 21, I'd never been on an aeroplane.
Right.
Um, I'd never met a graduate who wasn't a teacher, or because I went to university, or somebody at the university. I was the first person in my family to go to university. Um, by 41, I was the chief executive of an international insurance broker with operations in 12 countries. And
Wow.
and I often say to people, um, like that's very much the working class boy made good kind of story. But I have to say, I climbed the greasy pole, which is how one refers to going up the sort of corporate ladder, and found myself up a greasy pole. Um, I've got photos of me then, and there's this kind of dead-eyed, false-smiled businessman staring out from these photos. Um, that work was great to start with because it propelled me away from poverty, but it became my lord. It became
Right.
my idol. It became, the purpose of my life. And um, it really took the death of my first wife from cancer to wake me up.
Wow.
Um, God, in some ways, I'm sure he was preparing me for something, but he'd let me go to sleep in faith terms. And Jane's death was very much that wake up call because all the status and all the money and all the this, that, and the other that surrounded me at the time was of no use at all. And the only thing that made sense to me at that point was going to church on a Sunday, sitting at the back of the congregation, and quite frankly and quite honestly, weeping,
Mm.
because that's what I do. Because it was the hour and a half in my life that meant most, where I could just sort of be on my own and think about it. Because I was a single parent with three kids at the time,
Wow.
and 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 people say, well, what changed you? Because I did change, and I always say it was the ordinary things of church. Um, the welcome team spotted that there was this guy sitting at the back looking a bit unhappy. The pastoral care team wrapped around me. Two people literally adopted me and had coffee with me every Saturday morning for a little while. They drove me into a small group, which are a group of people I love to this day, and then and then and then just to glue me in further, they made me the treasurer just to make sure I had a job and I wasn't going to go anywhere. And just to complete the story, a few years later, I completed the set by marrying the parish office manager, who's my wife today. It was one of those things where, and it was just ordinary. It was nothing fancy, no fancy programs or anything else. It was just the ordinary stuff of church. Utterly changed my life,
Wow.
and really that's when 12 years ago, and it's only 12 years that I decided to come into the charity sector. Uh,
Has it only been 12 years?
12 years. That's
Gosh.
that. So my wife died 15 years ago. 12 years ago is when I came into the charity sector. So when you say well known, I mean, honestly, I'm a relative newcomer compared to some. But in actual fact, the first 5 years I spent in Africa, well, mostly in Africa and Southeast Asia, working for World Vision. Because
Right.
I was an insurance guy. What did I know about faith and the charity sector? Nothing at all. And it just so happened that World Vision were looking for a global insurance director, and I thought, right, okay, that's something I can do, and
Right.
ended up providing insurance solutions to smallholder farmers across the world, a million of them actually. Um, and to this day, some of the things I built, like a climate insurance scheme I built, has 10 million beneficiaries today. And that's the great thing about when you build things, they just chunk away in the background and you don't actually have to look after them sometimes. So that was a great adventure. And after finishing my sort of bigger projects, and I've worked in Tanzania and Myanmar and all over the place, great adventure. The job at Stewardship came up, and wow, that was amazing. What a great organization. And that was just wonderful for me because I got to see just how wonderful and vibrant the Christian community was. And that's how, in some ways, people know me because, Stewardship sits at the center, providing about 100 million in funding to
Yeah.
6,000 churches, 4,000 charities, and 2,000 mission workers. So it's a great way to see the landscape. I often think it's a bit like having a house on a hill working at Stewardship because you get to see the landscape. But in the end, I spent 5 years there as well. I was really happy to move on to CAP, not because I wanted to leave Stewardship, but because there's that sense of participation. I didn't want to be on the hill. I wanted to be in the mission field, and that brought me to CAP. So CAP is really important to me, and this brings my story to an end in some ways. Well, not an end; it brings me to date.
Definitely not an end.
It's where I need to be. It's meeting God in those difficult moments with people in crisis where he's already there. We're not bringing God into these moments. He's already there working in people's hearts, and working with the church and providing really what is a frontline mission, missional work is just a great thing to be part of. Just one final thing. I'm sure we talk more about CAP, but CAP is the most unusual ministry. I think it's often a bit like in the Bible when Jesus sends the apostles out to do healing and miracles, and they basically go, "What? We're tax collector, fishermen, and things. We don't mind following you, but we don't." Well, we send 3,000 ordinary people out into the mission field, and they do healings and miracles. They see signs and wonders because God works through them, and it is absolutely life-changing, not just for meeting those that we choose to serve or we look to serve. It changes you as well. I often say, which is slightly not very theologically sound, that since I joined CAP a year ago, like the Grinch, my heart has grown 3 sizes, and it's that type of work. So that's a long answer to a short question. Sorry to do
Wow,
that.
Stuart, that's incredible. And I think if we had a couple of hours, I would love to unpack each of those areas that you've shared. And I think what's one of the really profound things as you were speaking is just that sense of how God has used all of your experiences and all of your life
Yeah.
journey to bring you almost to a time such as this at CAP. Because it feels like with the work you're doing at CAP, and we'll come on to that later, but you're working with church leaders, you're working with businesses, you're working with different donors, but you're also working, as you said, with some of the people that you would understand from growing up. Some of those people, you talk about economic decline from Glasgow into Coventry, and unfortunately, there are many towns and villages and cities in this country right now that are in economic decline, and there are people that are facing the same problems that maybe we faced in the 60s and 70s,
Oh,
and but you're
absolutely.
there, and God's put you there. You understand that. You understand that from your lived experience, and but you also understand how to deal with a CEO of a global corporate that's, how to talk their language as well. And isn't that incredible? I'm just listening to your story thinking, God has brought you to a place for a time such as this because you understand each of those audiences. And just the beauty of the local church, for example, like that healing journey you went on, with after your first wife passed, and just the beauty of the local church, being the local church, loving people, helping people, be putting their arms alongside people. And I think it's very easy to forget that that's what the church does and what the church is brilliant at. We sometimes expect the church to be, teacher us everything and disciple us with everything and help us with everything and be the answer to everything. But actually, the church, when it loves people through their challenges into wholeness, is, I really believe, the bride in her full glory. So I love the fact that you're at CAP now, just bringing your whole self, it feels like, bringing all of your experience. Is that what it feels like for you when you kind of go to work?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's a strangest feeling because, um, I mean, one way I often say is you live your life forwards, but you understand it backwards. So, if I look at the most important things in my life, they're almost all accidents and coincidences and things that I wasn't actually planning, and that's just God going, no, over there, no, do that, right? And it's only now that I can see the preparatory steps, and my failures and troubles are often the best preparation. It's not the successes and the achievements. It's the refining and the and all of that. So I'd certainly say to any, if I was saying even to the sort of 21-year-old, Stuart, is I'd be saying, don't worry about when things feel like they're going wrong. God's just teaching you something. Listen and learn, and it'll become a strength as you go forward.
That's brilliant. But you're right. That's something I think most of us only see in hindsight, right? We kind of go, God was there and he was moving me on and changing my character and changing my heart. And I want to just pick up something, Stuart, just quickly. You said, if you look at 21-year-old Stuart to 41-year-old Stuart, you've gone from being the first person in your family to go to university, you know, sort of 10, 12% of people in your school did A levels, and then you went on to university, which must have been a smaller percentage still.
Yeah.
And then 20 years later, you're the CEO of a global insurance firm. Now, from from most metrics, that's incredible success from most metrics. But then you said very quickly that, the picture of you sort of feeling like, a little bit not dead behind the eyes, but a little bit kind of like I've lost who I am. So what do you mean by that? Because, a 41-year-old Stuart is looking very successful.
Oh yeah, tremendous. I mean, again, very successful. I'll be honest. I had an Aston Martin in the garage. I had a house by the sea, a flat in London. You had, all of the things that the world tells you is going to make you happy and successful.
Right.
The fancy holidays, the but as a person, in some ways, I think God was saving me there. I had no idea what all that was about. sitting in this mail show going, I, I'm just, a young guy. In my head, I was just still a young guy from Coventry working hard and thinking that's the right thing to do.
Right.
I was never working for that. I was just, I mean, in some ways, it was all from my family escaping poverty, and I got the contagion of that and just took it as far as I could do. But it really, but that's where faith really comes in, because what you know that all these programs the world tells you this is going to make you happy, fame is going to make you happy, wealth is going to make you happy, power is going to make you happy. I mean, I can witness, I've tried it. Those things aren't going to make you happy. But if you have those things, they're not going to make you unhappy as long as you have purpose and faith.
Right.
And at Stewardship, I got to work with people who were in a situation I'd been in, but what they were bringing was purpose and faith, and they were being stewards of their resources. So don't let me put you off
Yeah.
going down the route I went down. If that's the path God's taking you on, go with him. He's fairly incorrect in his assessment of where you should be. But what I would say is your faith and your ethic and your integrity and your character is the most important thing to work on, because at the point that trouble comes to you, that's when it will really tell what's real and what isn't.
Yeah. No, and Stuart, that's so helpful. And the reason I sort of picked that up is because a lot of our listeners will be entrepreneurs. You know, they may be of a certain age where they're looking to build their businesses or their ventures, but they're Christians. You know, they've got a heart for God and to do things God's way. But there's this real nuance. You know, if you go on LinkedIn in the morning, there's getting more leads, hustle culture, grow your business, become a success. And God is interested in that, but he's more interested in our character, as you said. And there's this real balance. And, we can be doing the summit in a couple of months, as we said earlier, where we want to share stories of what God's doing in people's lives and people's business, because that measure of success isn't wrong, but it can't be to the detriment of our faith and our purpose and our values and those deeper things that God's placed in us. And I just love hearing that story that, you've let God use you for worldly success, and God's using you for that deeper purpose that's coming out from within you, which is amazing. And I think it's a real encouragement and a subtle challenge, I think, to some of our listeners that, success is not always measured in a way that the world measures it.
Yeah, and I would say it might again, my advice to the younger me, and also to perhaps some of your listeners is if you build your character whilst you're building your career or your business, then you're building for enduring success. if
Right.
if you don't do that, the problem the eventually a problem will come that you've not got the resources to deal with, and I think that's where things really tell. And there were some studies in an organization that's way back in history, and they used the phrase, what gets you here won't get you there. So actually, that your striving and your ambition will get you here, your character will get you here.
Amazing.
And I think that's the really important. And often in the early part of your career, as it was for me, it was really my ambition and drive and work rate and everything that was really powering me forward. And I see so many people who are really concentrating on that, but it's not enough to keep going. If you want to play the long game, develop your character, develop your networks, develop your faith, develop all of that side of who you are, and you will have the strength to keep going, and you'll have the blessings from God to guard your heart and your and everything else.
Brilliant. And I think, yeah, I think it's just a powerful message for some of our younger entrepreneurs. And, it is, I appreciate it's very hard sometimes for young entrepreneurs to understand these lessons that you're sharing when you're in the middle of raising funds, trying to build a business, trying to grow. But yeah, I want to encourage our listeners to, let God work in you as much as he's working through you in your business, because that is what sustains you. And for some of us older folks sitting here today listening and talking as Stuart and I are, we can testify to that. So no, I love that, Stuart. Now, I just want to, I can just, the passion you have for CAP is, I can see it's not just because it's a job. It's like you said, it's that moment of time when you're looking back and, wanting to bring a generation forward. So what does CAP look like? For those that don't know CAP, what does it look like from two perspectives? One, from your perspective as the CEO, and what does it look like on the ground?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a really good question because it's something I've been working on quite a lot. So, you know, because I felt I knew CAP. Before I joined, John Kirkby's been a friend for ages.
Right.
I, helped them find at Stewardship. I helped them finance their new building, so it was a bit like hiring your bank manager. I've been a supporter for ages as well. I still am, and so I got this. I understand CAP completely. But my first thing I did um, or amongst the first things I did is I did a huge tour around the churches across the entirety of the UK to
Well,
to go right. I want to know what this thing really is at the front line, and that really revealed something to me that was incredibly important. Was because the image of CAP has. Uh, um, in the world is of a large charity, and I've got nothing against large charities at all, but I don't think that is what CAP is.
right.
Um, I think in reality it's a church-based movement because okay, there's 300 of us ish, a little bit more than that, based out of Bradford. Some are remote, but based out of Bradford, that is the charity, and that's the in some ways it was referred to as head office, which I hate. I now refer it to the support hub, but that's the
Right.
central support for a movement. Because if we take what's really going on and the truth of it is there are 3,000 people who are debt coaches, debt center managers, life skill coaches, money coaches, job club leaders, befrienders, prayer warriors. And
Wow.
so what we're actually talking is about not 300, but 3,000 in nearly 1,000 churches with 250 debt centers across the UK. And
Wow.
even then, CAP is largely supported by lots of regular small donations from Christians in those churches. There's 30,000 of them. So
Wow.
we are truly a movement of 33,000 Christians who are actively looking to help our friends, neighbors, um, and others in our community who are struggling with financial crisis and um, with um, with financial vulnerability. And if you talk to any of our clients, the people we serve, what they'll tell you is at the beginning, talk to them at the beginning, and the money issue is overwhelming. Literally, Mammon has taken these poor souls to the very gates of hell. They're lost sheep. And they are isolated and they're anxious to a level that is very, very significant indeed. Um, but what they'll talk about is how a person from a local church came to them, someone from their community with the same accent, who knows the roads around their house, who's probably been their local postman or
Right.
something, you know, has come into their home at their most anxious time and taken them from chaos to order, from fear to hope, and from isolation to community. And that is the signs and wonders. That is the healing and miracles. And
Wow.
so you talk to them at the end of the process. Oh, yeah, there was this money thing. But what really happened, what was important, was I'm not anxious. I'm not isolated. That a community has wrapped around me. Oh yeah, we solved some money problems as well. You know, uh, and that is what CAP looks like. And these people have seen the gates of hell, and they've come to the gates of heaven, and they know they're not going back. And the joy and the pride that releases is just extreme. I remember one lady,
Yeah.
Michelle, I don't think she'll mind me saying at all, from Barnsley, who literally was existing in her pajamas all day, every day. And when I met her, she had the most stunning hairdo, incredibly smart, talking joyfully about her kids and her family and her life. And that's the difference we're looking to make. And literally any one time we're helping 10,000 people do that journey at any one time. And I think the number's much greater, because I don't think you count the numbers of people who don't get into the formal process. The church just helps a bit. So
Right.
I bet it's 5 times that at any one time who are gaining help from this movement. Now, that is that's not a charity. That is a church being helped by a central support hub of a charity, because we do all the technical geeky stuff. But that doesn't matter. That's being helped by a charity. It's the church reaching into its community and being a beacon for hope and for transformation. Now, that's what CAP really is. It's not a large charity. It's a church-based movement. And you can see from my history why I love the church. God's plan A isn't, in the Bible, it doesn't say, and the kingdom will come because of lots of large charities. I don't remember that passage. I've read it a couple of times, well, maybe more than a couple. I don't remember that passage. Maybe you can tell me where it is, and I've missed it. I see that God's plan A is the local church, is
Yeah.
Christians living in community and helping those in need and loving our neighbours. That's plan A. I want CAP to be a plan A, or a plan A movement. And I'm really passionate about that. And also I see and we're moving on a little bit in CAP to sort of strands to plans and strategies. I actually want to enhance that localization. I want us to feel more and more not like a large national charity, but like a network of community organizations of churches really reaching out. And it's different to reach out to someone in Cornwall, as Northern Ireland, as
Right.
rural Suffolk. Those are different issues, and the amount of the amount of energy and innovation and smart people in churches is limitless. And I'm really excited about the future, as you can probably tell.
Yeah. Well, I certainly can tell, and I think just I think it's incredible just to hear the fact that, and putting those numbers aside, but just to see the exponential effect of the vision that God's given you as the CEO, but also what's been happening with CAP over the last many years is that it's exponential, because as the church does what she's great at doing, which is loving people, serving people, supporting people, you're bringing more and more people into freedom, and as they come into freedom, they shout to others about it, and that's that multiplication effect that the church, that Jesus speaks about. It's never going to end. His reign is never going to end. It's only going to increase, and his government will only ever increase, which is a phenomenal theological statement if you wanted to unpack that, but we're not going to unpack that today. But I think, Stuart, like, just a couple of really practical thoughts. Are we in a time now, because of all the doom and gloom around us? What's the litmus test on the ground now from CAP? Is it that the need is greater than ever? Is it, has it increased, decreased? What does it look like? Because you've got this incredible movement, and in some ways, wouldn't it be brilliant if CAP was never needed because everyone was in? I mean, that's a utopian, idealistic scenario that you don't need CAP. We're all potentially always going to need CAP, right, as an organization. But is that need getting greater? Is that need decreasing? What does it look like on the ground?
It's I'm very sad to say it's getting greater. I would much prefer to say that it's shrinking. Um, and it's one of the UK's biggest problems now. So just to give you some basic statistics, 1 in 3 of us as adults is extremely stressed about our finances. So
Right,
this isn't a them problem. This is an us problem.
right.
Um, um, 14 million people out of about 65 million people are technically in poverty. I mean, I'm not saying they'd label themselves that way, but statistically they are. 9 million people are in problem debt. I.e., they
Wow.
have more debt than they can afford. 3 million, about a third of those, are in a stage where they really do need um, specialist debt advice. And at least 1 million need the sort of face-to-face personal debt advice that CAP provides. So whilst I'm really proud to be helping, between 10 and 50,000 pounds, 10 and 50,000 people each day, um, we're only scratching the surface.
Incredible.
Um, we really need to reach more, and I have a particular concern for more deprived communities, um, and we want to redouble our efforts to reach out into those areas where there are concentrations of people who might who are just not being helped, and and we're particularly keen to help those who can't just go online or pick up the phone or help themselves. Um, Very many of our clients have disabilities that mean that it's really quite hard to just go online or what have you, or they lack the financial education or the confidence to be able to help themselves, or they're digitally excluded, or a whole variety of factors. But there's really quite a large and growing group of people who can't just go online and sort their finances out, and a lot of them have lost trust in who they're talking to. So,
Right.
so who's on the end of that phone? Who's on the end of that online service? And because all the people chasing them are at the end of the phone, or they're all the people chasing them are at the end of an online service. And so, therefore, how do you make that different? And so sometimes just having a person, even if it's just at the beginning of the process, to hold your hand a bit and get you over that emotional leap to get going is extremely important. A lot of these people are very hidden. Our statistics say our clients have waited, a third of them wait a year before they ask for help. Um, you know, and that's no, it's actually 2/3 wait a year, 1/3 wait 3 years before they
3
actually get
years.
help. So they're often in this stress for a long time. So any statistics you look at, remember there's a hidden community. Our community is quite hidden, and we work so hard to find them. And we work with job centres and GPs and counsellors, and to just to be able to spot the people who may need help but haven't yet asked for it, so that we as a local church can actually reach out and offering them a helping hand. So
Wow.
this is a growing problem, and it's actually showing up in our politics, because you can see it in the growing welfare bill, the amount of economic inactivity, the level of mental health stress. I mean, what we're dealing with is very much the front line of those issues. And I have to say, I don't want to be political, but we spend a lot of time talking to government, trying to say, guys, you really do need to start to get to the root causes of some of this stuff, because um, old thinking about deterring people from claiming benefits or incentivizing them into work. We've tried that for a couple of decades now. What people really need and what they want is proper support into work. I mean, our clients, almost university, would love jobs and good jobs that pay reasonably and are reasonably secure in order to move forward as active members of society. And we do all we can to get them those, but I just think that this is a problem that our society really has to grapple with over the next few years. It has no choice.
Yeah. Well, Stuart, some of those statistics are quite shocking, I must
Yeah.
admit. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize the scale of it in terms of, but when you look at it, as you said, from a government perspective, and you look at kind of where their focus is, you can see that this is a problem that the government know they have to deal with. But I think for me, my faith lens, and I suppose my practical lens, says that as you're taking people on that journey as CAP, and as people go on that journey in their own lives of just that financial breathing space, there's always that desire to want to do something and make a difference. And that, again, that's what the local church is so good at doing: serving, loving, helping people, being community. And my particular lens on that, and actually is economic lens. We are an SME, a small business economy, as the UK. And I'm just like, how do we help more people realize that they can become a plumber, run a small plumbing firm, run a small, whatever it might be. And it's not about being the big entrepreneur, the big guys on the front of the Times newspaper, next tech unicorn. It's about having that belief and ability to be able to support yourself and your family and the community around you, extended family, friends, through your work, through what you do. And that's what we're passionate about as a wonderful summit. It's like, this is not about you getting rich. This is about you being a living example of God's providence and provision in your life, and bringing others with you, your staff members, your family, your community, and saying, do you know what? God can do this in and through me. And we were talking the other day as a team, and someone said they read that scripture. I think it's in John, where people say, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" When they're talking about Jesus, can the Messiah, the Savior of the world, come from a little town called Nazareth? It wasn't the center point of commerce and the center point of industry exactly. It was nowhere near that. It was a kind of little backwater village. But we want to say that to people. Can anything good come from the village and the town and the city that you live in? And the answer is yes, because Jesus came from Nazareth and he was able to fulfill God's plan and purpose to change the world. And, your plan and purpose will not change the whole world, but it could change your life, your family, your community. And that's our message as the summit this year. That fresh hope and that fresh growth comes in because God can do it in you and through you. And that's why we're so excited to partner with CAP, because we want to see the church community come together as entrepreneurs and innovators and say, how can we work with CAP? How can we work on behalf of CAP in changing those communities around us? And so, yeah, I'm really excited to have you guys as our lead partner and just work together, not just for the event, but ongoing, to see the kind of entrepreneurship spirit just flow through CAP and entrepreneurs connecting to CAP. And that's what I'm excited about. What are you looking forward to when it comes to this partnership?
Well, without repeating everything you just said, that I mean, just again, I have great hope. You're gonna tell that I'm an optimist at the end of this.
Love it.
But that entrepreneurial spirit is very dear to my heart personally. Because again, when I worked in Africa, I was working in microfinance. There are no jobs. They don't exist. So everything was entrepreneurial. It was people in small communities realizing that God had provided, and clearing bits of land to create farms, or saving up to buy a motorbike to be able to transport stuff, or whatever it was. um, and that entrepreneurial spirit, I think we need to see much more of in what we're doing. And I'm incredibly hopeful. If I see in the generations coming through, the the emergence of the side hustle, which I absolutely love as an idea. You know, I'm going to do something on YouTube, or I'm going to buy and sell something on eBay, or I'm going to, all power to people who are thinking that way. And more people, I think, are. I have great faith in a generation coming through who are okay. I might have a bit of a part-time job here. I might do that. But what they're doing is they're investing in themselves. They're either investing in their training, their knowledge, their network, a business, those sorts of things. And that type of thinking is hugely hopeful. And we see that in our own client base sometimes. I mean, there was this couple I met who were helped by their local debt centre. They got themselves into all sorts of trouble, and so what they did to thank the debt centre was they cooked all of the people they'd worked with a meal. And
Lovely.
this meal was amazing. So everybody in the centre said, you should do that more often. They now have a catering business,
Wow.
and it all came from this thank you meal. I went, hang on, this is a thing. You guys can cook,
Wow.
and you can organise, and it's a joy to see. And I'd love to see more of those stories. I mean, I think too often, a little too often, we've looked at people in terms of getting them from not okay to okay. And I think more and more we should have the ambition as human beings to go from not okay to flourishing. You know, and I think to get to flourishing, you've got to not just think about being okay. You've got to think about investing in yourself,
Yeah.
um, and then, you know, observing the transformation as a result. So that's why we're supporting Wonderful Summit, because it's fundamental to have that entrepreneurial attitude, bringing that in and allowing that flourishing to occur.
I love that. I love that. But I also think, you know, from an entrepreneurship lens, there's a real call and challenge to actually say, well, as we're building, we got to make sure that we're not building just for us. We're building for the communities around us, as I said. And I just love the thought that as entrepreneurs are creating jobs and creating income, and they're supporting their staff, but actually they can also support CAP. That is then going out and supporting people on the very, you know, edge of community, as you said, and those people that need it the most are at the gates of hell. How cool is that? Is that entrepreneurs, as they're building, are supporting those to go from where they are, not just to okay, but into flourishing. And I think there's a kind of like circle in my mind that I have of like this circular economy where, as we as Christians are building and generating income and generating employment, we're helping to bring others through that journey as well. And that to me is kind of really, really powerful kind of picture I have in my mind. So it's why, yeah,
I'd love to introduce you to a few folk, because some of the biggest philanthropists I've ever worked with, back in the day when they weren't successful, did exactly that.
right,
And it actually links to character, because if you're getting involved in that sort of thing, and you have to get directly involved to really do this, but if you build your business and build your character by linking to those less fortunate, you're on that ladder that goes further. And I think that I almost all of the people who I work with at Stewardship at the top of the philanthropic have built their characters and their businesses and careers at the same time. And you can see that they often made choices about that sort of thing really early on, often in
right.
their early 20s or even earlier, and then carried it through as a discipline as they went through. So it's quite remarkable. I'm yeah.
And maybe we need to share some of those stories at the summit, Stuart, because I think,
I've been thinking in that direction.
yeah, I've got a
One
couple of
couple in particular I'd love to introduce you to.
right,
I'm going to try and
okay,
get hold of them. Um, In fact, it's on my list. I've written it down.
Amazing. We can't get into a summit marketing meeting now because we're on a podcast,
Oh
but
yeah, true. Yes.
but I think
But if
I
I
think
can't get them, I'll get someone else. But I think that because I think young entrepreneurs really want to speak to people who've been through that
exactly.
journey and say, well, you say what builds character, right? What does that look like? Well, it looks like this.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely true. And I think that sense of if I'm a young entrepreneur and I'm coming to Summit North, I could be from a town or a city or a location where maybe I don't see that much flourishing, as you're saying, or I don't see, a massive amount of hope. And so I'm just really trusting that everyone that comes is going to leave with that fresh hope. They're like, look at that man, look at that lady. They've done it. God's done it in them over the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. He can do it through me. That's just the spark we want to see for people to have. And that spark, we wanted to create a fresh sense of momentum into CAP because you're doing that in the tens of thousands. And, we know that God's going to use you guys to do that in the hundreds of thousands as we move forward.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited about that. Now, from a kind of CAP perspective, what does the year look like? Just kind of coming to land now. You've got so much activity around. How do people get involved with CAP outside of coming to the summit? How do people get involved with CAP in terms of just generally?
Well, generally, we'd love for you to connect with your local CAP centre. I mean, just go and see what we do. If wherever you are in the UK, there will be a CAP centre nearby or a church that is connected with us. If you go on our website or contact me directly and just go and see what we do. And if you look on our website also about supporting us, also if you need help, reach out to us, or you know someone who needs help, reach out to us. There's nothing like getting involved that way as well. Um, um, what this year's all about is a real passion for that localization and that community feel, and also slightly expanding our footprint into those more challenging areas. So if there's a challenging area near you, that you feel that we should be part of, a community near you, again, contact us. We want to be a really out there kind of organization. So, and a great way to get in contact would be to also be at Wonderful North, and
Yeah,
we'll have a team there for you to interact with. So we're not just a websitey type of people. You can pop down to your local church. You can ring us up. You can do whatever you like. But we'd love to engage with people who are passionate about what we're doing. We really would.
brilliant, brilliant. And I'm sure people listening to this podcast are going to be doing any of those call to actions because yeah, it's an incredible journey, an incredible story. Just final question, Stuart, just something we ask all of our guests, or I like to ask all of my guests, but you might have already answered this, but I'm going to ask you anyway again. What would be one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
I think we've certainly covered grow your character at the same rate you grow your ambition,
Yeah,
and I I I think that covers the heart of what I'd say. But central to that, um, I would be encouraging my younger self to be less fearful, more hopeful, and what's the best way of putting this? And to put Jesus more central.
wow. Well, you can't say better than that, really. You can't disagree with that. Stuart, Stuart, it's been an absolute pleasure just to spend this time with you, and thank
Yeah,
you so
thanks,
much for
man.
sharing your heart, your in wisdom, your insight, but also just your passion for CAP, but more than that, for the local church, for the community, for restaurant, all of that stuff has been a real download. I'm personally leaving very encouraged, and just a fresh sense of encouragement about the good that's in the local church because it's very easy to look at the downsides and the things that the church isn't doing, and look at some statistics and say the church is in decline and this, that, and the other, and all of those things that get bred in the media. But actually, just hearing what God is doing in and through the local church with CAP and your passion, I'm leaving excited. So thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, just one other thing on the local church and the church is in decline. I mean, that's a very UK Western
Yeah,
perspective. I mean, the biggest Christian crowd I was ever part of was 7 million people. Um, um, which was actually, I was in the Philippines when the Pope visited after Typhoon Haiyan in 2015. Actually, I was working
right.
on the recovery of Typhoon Haiyan, um, and the city was literally shut, and this crowd formed along the highway into the city, and it was 7 million people. So me
Wow.
and my colleague joined it just because this was the most incredible thing to be part of, and it, it's that's a sort of feel for what the church in the global south feels like. Whereas
Right.
if you come up here to the sort of like the as it were the old world rather than the new world, it's all in decline. I mean, I'm really sorry. God is not in decline. you know, um, we've really got to look at that. And I think if I look at what the church is doing rather than its past failures and problems, like any
Yeah.
organization, if I look at the vibrancy of those parts of the church that are getting out there and doing stuff, it's I have just great hope for the future.
Oh, man. Love that. Stuart, thank you again.
No,
And
thanks, Dan.
look forward to this journey with you this year. I found it super inspiring listening to Stuart and hearing some of his journey, just the highs and lows of life, but how he's landed in a place where his purpose, his passions, and his skills really align. If you want to hear more from Stuart, or in fact even meet him if you haven't already, he's going to be at the Wonderful Summit, which we're hosting in Bradford on the 20th of March this year. It's going to be a great day of inspiration, equipping, making new connections, learning how to build our ventures the right way. And Stuart will be there along with many other CEOs and entrepreneurs. So head over to wonderfulsummit.com and get your tickets today.